He opened the car door, threw me inside, and got out with me. Altava was armed. He had already brought me here for the hair, and was driving with one hand while holding my hair with the other. He started hitting my face on Carlos's panel and cursed at me. So I have to start this story. I'm going to tell you the story of my mother, not only because my mother, but also because our destinations intertwine. You'll understand why in a moment. My mother's generation was a black woman who lived. He opened the car door, threw me inside, and got out with me. Altava was armed. He had already brought me here to get my hair, and he was holding it with one hand while holding my face against the car panel with the other. He started to curse, so I decided to start telling the story of my mother. I'm telling this story not only because my mother is important to me, but also because our destinies are intertwined. You'll understand why in a moment. My mother's genealogical line was from a black woman who lived and worked on a farm here in the interior of Serra. She ended up getting involved with the farm owner. He was married, and she got pregnant. His wife learned of the pregnancy and expelled her from the farm. She didn't have family support or anyone to help her, so she ended up living on the street. You are already the widower who lived at the site around there. I'm going to tell you the story of my mother and call her to talk to you. She was newly married with a young lady, her second marriage. She was already older. On a farm in the interior of Serra, my mother lived and worked. She ended up getting involved with the owner of the farm. He was married, and when he learned that she was pregnant, he expelled her from the farm. She didn't have family support or anyone to help her, and she ended up living on the street. You are already the widower who lived at the site around there. I called her to talk to him. He was newly married with a young lady, his second marriage. She was already too old to have children. They were a couple and living life again, giving each other a second chance. They could not have children. I already had several daughters from his first marriage, and she accepted. So, she stayed in this place of mine. Even my grandfather was there for the delivery. He was the one who delivered my mother, and soon after, she was born. Although this gentleman created my mother, she says he was an angel. He was very well liked in the region. Then, he was an illiterate man. My mother couldn't have children, and that was really hard for her. She was afraid of what would happen to Aleri, but then she met this wonderful man, and they fell in love. He was a kind and generous man, and he loved my mother with all his heart. He was a prayer and he didn't just give. My mother and he were very happy together. But unfortunately, my mother's wife wasn't as affectionate. She didn't show much love to my mother. Everything was a reason to take a beating. If he couldn't get a chicken, he would take the milk. He was really mean to my mother. My mother says that her child won the sisters' dolls, and it was her that preached like that in the wall. My mother couldn't open my dolls. He was a kind and giving person. My mother was no longer the same after he left. She raised my mother without much affection. Everything was a reason to take a beating. She couldn't get a chicken, and if she did, she couldn't get the milk. She was picked on. My mother reports that she was the one who took the sisters' dolls, older, and that she preached like that in the war. My mother couldn't open the dolls, because she didn't have a childhood. She only worked. She had love from her father, but her mother had none. As he got older, he also began to assault one of his sisters, one of my mother's sisters. She came to Serra. He lived in Sao Paulo, and seeing that situation, he took the sisters and their life away from that house. He told my mother, "You also have to leave." My mother was afraid of what Aleri would do. Mother had a hard life. She didn't have a childhood, and her father was very strict. Her mother wasn't very present, either. As he got older, he started to be violent with one of her sisters. My mother's sister lived in Sao Paulo, and when she saw what was going on, she told my mother, "You have to leave, too." My mother was afraid, and she ran away with her sisters. They went to Sao Paulo, where she finally had the opportunity to study and work. 13 years later, she left that situation and went to Sao Paulo. However, it wasn't as good as she had hoped. She worked at her sister's house, but it didn't take long before she came back to Serra, but not to her old home. She returned to the home of another sister, and her sister, my mother's reaction was to run away with the sisters, who came to Sao Paulo. There, I finally had the opportunity to study and work. After 13 years, I left this situation and went to Sao Paulo. I was not very well as promised, though. Right away, I also worked at the sister's house. It didn't take long before I came back to Serra, but not to ProSite. I returned home to another sister of another sister. Her sister lived in a townhouse. It said that from above, the house had a bacino, so close that she spotted a man. She found him very beautiful and very bohemian. He liked to drink, smoke, recite poetry, and sing. My mother fell in love with him soon and got involved. However, when the sisters of my mother found out that I was interested in this boy, they didn't accept it. They said that it was already very serious, and then they spoke. They said that you either end with this dating, or you leave, or you're expelled. My parents' house was a townhouse, and it had a small courtyard. My dad was a very handsome, bohemian man who loved to drink, smoke, and recite poetry. He fell in love with my mother and wanted to marry her. However, her sisters did not approve of him. They thought he was already very involved with another woman, and they told my mother that she would have to choose between him and her family. My mother was afraid to return home, but my father promised that they would find a way. He spoke to his mother, who agreed to house my mother until he could afford to marry her. My mother left with only 2 bags, a few clothes, a bag of sugar, and went to live in this family's house. My father's friend helped me. I was a little hesitant about going back home, but my parents reassured me. My father, who had a visa for alcohol, was always very affectionate with us, but he was present because we shared our attention between him and alcohol. My parents told me that they would find a way. They spoke to my uncle, who said that he would house my mother until he had the conditions to marry her. My mother came with 2 bags of clothes, a bag of sugar, and went to live in this family's house. My father's friend was my father. It took a year for them to organize the wedding, and then they decided to go to Sao Paulo in search of a better life. A year after the wedding, I was born, and then they joined me. They always sent money to Serra to build a home. My paternal grandfather was responsible for building this house, and my father worked in a furniture store. My mother worked at the airport and in a furniture factory in Guarulhos. My father had a strike, but he soon wanted to. It took them a year to organize their wedding, and then they decided to head to Sao Paulo in the hope of finding better opportunities. A year after the wedding, I was born, and they decided to move money there. They always sent money to Serra to build a home, and my paternal grandfather was responsible for building this house. My father worked in a furniture factory, and my mother worked at the airport in Guarulhos. My father had a strike, but he soon wanted to return to Serra. He came back shortly thereafter, and I came back with my mother when I was about 3 years old. 3 years later, the middle brother was born, and 7 years later, my younger brother was born. But our childhood was very difficult. We suffered because my father had a visa for alcohol, so he was always very affectionate with us, but he was present because we divided our attention between him and alcohol. He came back to Serra shortly thereafter. I came back with my mother, so I was about 3 years old. 7 years later, my younger brother was born, and then the middle brother was born. Our childhood was very difficult. We suffered because my father was always drinking alcohol, so he was very affectionate with us. But he was always present, because we divided our attention between him and alcohol. My father didn't earn very well, and he drank all weekend and all night. My mother didn't. It affected her teaching, but she didn't stop. She worked on what you could supplement. She washed clothes, sewed, and made a break here and there. Then she decided to take a hairdressing course. That's when she managed to take care of us and have an income in the garage of our house. She always prioritized our studies and missed the. I didn't earn much from my job, so I spent the weekend and night drinking. My mother didn't drink, but she was affected by it. She taught elementary and middle school, and then she worked on what you could supplement. She washed clothes, sewed, and made a break here and there. Then she decided to take a course in hairdressing. That's when she managed to take care of us and have an income. She always prioritized our studies, even though she missed the basics. There was no shortage of good school materials. My mother has always been very worried about this. She felt a lot for not having had this education or study, but she made a question that we were then. My father had this problem with alcohol. It was very difficult, but we managed to wait. My childhood went along with my suffering brothers. We remember her with sadness today, but she was always there. United past. I grew up and I had a solid foundation, and the resources to learn were readily available. My mother was always concerned about my education, wishing I had had a better start. But my father struggled with alcoholism, which made things difficult. Despite the challenges, my childhood was filled with love and support from my family. As I grew up, I developed a strong interest in a girl from my neighborhood. We had been friends since we were very young, and by the time I was 16, I was head over heels for her. She was stunning, and although he didn't notice me at first, he eventually came to my street to talk. We would meet at my door, and he asked me for a kiss. When I was 16, I started to develop strong feelings for a boy who lived in my neighborhood. I had been in love with him since I was 13, but he didn't seem to notice me. Then, when I was 15 or 16, he started coming to my street, saw me, and asked to talk. We talked on my doorstep, and he asked me to kiss him. I said no, and he left, but he came back soon after, and he asked me to date. He said, "I won't stop seeing my friends. I'll only see you on the weekends." I finally agreed to his conditions. I was very in love with him. When my dad found out that I was dating this boy, I went to ask for permission, but his father didn't leave, because of my I said no to kissing on the first date, and he got upset. He left, but then he came back and asked me to go on a date. We talked for a while, and then he asked me to spend the weekend with him. I told him I only had time for one day, and I didn't want to stop seeing my friends. He finally accepted, and I was very happy. I told my dad I was dating this boy, and he asked me to go with him to meet him. My dad didn't like him, and he didn't want me to date him. I was already in love with him. I was a teenager, and I wanted to be with him. I insisted on dating him, and we started talking. He came to my house to meet me, and he saw my boyfriend there. A relative spoke to him, and he left. When I left the motel, I was going to talk to him. He didn't want to, but I said, "People need to be related, right, Dad?" I saw him in the bar, playing Asu, which was older than 5 years. I was determined to explore that relationship, and as a teenager, I was eager to try new things. I insisted on dating, and we began to talk more often. Your boyfriend came to the bar to meet the girl, and I asked him about it. A relative spoke about it, saying, leaving the motel, I was going to talk to him. He denied it until he spoke. People need to be related, right? At that time, being a virgin was a big taboo. My mother always asked Jessica, "You already had sex? Are you a virgin?" I didn't say I was a virgin, but I was very pure. I insisted that we had a relationship, and we had an active sex life. He demanded a lot, and he was also in love. But it was very constant, and it was passing time. I started to tire of that situation. I was a man who hadn't experienced sex yet, and it was a really big deal back then. My mom always asked Jessica, "You already had sex? Are you a virgin?" I said, "No, but I'm a virgin." I insisted that we were right, and we had an active sex life. He demanded a lot and wanted to be in love, too, but it was very constant. I started to get tired of the supposed betrayals that came from the conversations that arrived, and he denied and kept changing. He started to get very possessive of us once we started our relationship. Then, he started to get there every week. After a year, we started discussing this in one of these conversations, and I learned about my thoughts and my idea of the future. I really wanted to enter college and study. I always thought that the only way to improve the situation and help my family was we had some really great conversations, and he seemed to be a great guy. But then, a week after we started dating, he started acting weird. It was like he didn't understand me anymore. I had this dream of going to college and studying hard to help my family. So, I started cramming for pre-university exams, studying all day and all night. I even took a pre-university course on the weekends, but then, he started acting weird. He wasn't around as much, and he started giving me a hard time. I ended up finishing the course, but I didn't take it too well. He became very close with my middle brother, and even ended up staying over at my house. My mother was really affectionate towards him, and she followed my routine. I was studying so much for college that I barely had time to catch my breath. I was in and out of classes, and I even had a pre-college course. I was spending all my time on it, and he started getting upset with me. I didn't know how to handle it. In the end, I finished, but I didn't take it very well. He became very close with my middle brother, and even started to call me at home. My mother was very affectionate towards him, and she followed my routine. I started getting private calls on my cell phone from a voice that sounded deep and threatening. The voice would say, "You're in place," or "Am I seeing you go home now?" I turned off the phone if I had a friend. I received the call as if you had followed me. At that moment, I told my mother that I was going through this for the threats. Then, my mother went to see him, and I didn't imagine that it would be him speaking to him. He was the one who was talking to me, so I received threats. I started getting private calls on my cell phone from a guy with a deep, sexy voice. He'd say things like, "You're in place, right?" Or "Am I seeing you go home now?" I'd turn off the phone if I had a friend with me. It was like he was following me. One day, I was with my mom, and she said, "I'm going through this for you." I was surprised because I didn't imagine that she'd be seeing him. He spoke to her, and it turned something wrong. He should have been flirting with her, showing some affection, like she talked and walked only in the background. I knew it was time past, and he saw that this was not frightening, because I continued with my routine. He called me at night, and I always answered because, while I didn't attend, he didn't leave me alone. I answered and he said, "Oro, you now. We will make the years of dating. I will give you until this date." He was so sweet when he called me on October 18th, saying, "Oro, I'll give you until this date. If you don't come back, I'll tell your mother that you're no longer 20. We'll keep the relationship. I'll expose you to your mother." I didn't give him a hard time, and I followed my routine. On this day, October, he called me to go to my Cursinho. He called me, when finally I answered. He spoke to me about his mother. I said, on October 18th, I'll have to let you go. If you don't, I'll have to tell your mother that you're no longer 20. We'll have to end the relationship. I'll expose you to your mother. I didn't give him a hard time, and I followed my routine when it arrived on this day, October. I was getting ready to go to my Cursinho when he called me. I didn't answer him. He called me, and finally, I answered. He spoke to my mother, saying, she left, so I'll talk with her. I hung up and went to my cram. My father took me. It was time to arrive at the course. I sat in the chair. My phone rang. It was my mother. She was crying and cursing me. I saw home now. Anyway, from my cram to my house, it took me less than 10 minutes. When I arrived, my mother was standing, desperate, cursing me. He didn't suffer with his leg crossed to Lena. She left, so I'll talk with her. I hung up and went to my cram. My father took me to the time that I arrived at the course. I sat in the chair, my phone rang, and it was my mother, crying and cursing me. I saw home now. Anyway, from my cram to my house, about 20 to 30 minutes. I took less than 10. And when I arrived in my room, my mother was standing, desperate, cursing me. She crossed her legs and laughed, saying, you did it. I was wrong. You and I had sex with this guy on my couch at my house. And lo from my nose, I asked you. You denied because at that time, I didn't know. More virgin for my mother was her. I wanted me to marry a virgin, and he didn't. Don't worry. I will solve everything. And she spoke it really, because if she is a woman to have this sex life, then she with a playful smile, she recounted the events that had transpired. I had confided in her, expressing my confusion and disbelief. She gently reassured me, saying, don't worry, I'll handle everything. I assured her that I didn't want her to leave, and at that moment, I decided to move forward. I said, although I don't have a home, I'm living on the street, but with you, I'm content. I encouraged her to contact her father and let him know that I had reached out. Soon after, her father arrived, and in that moment, he shared that his daughter was not what he had expected. I'm so sorry, but I can't take her to my house. I really don't want her here anymore. I'm not going to buy everything right now, but I promise I'll get there soon. I'm sorry, but I'm living on the street. I'm not with you, but I'm here for you. I'll call your father now. He'll be so happy to hear from you. He'll want to know what's going on. He'll come to your house, and he'll be so surprised to see you. He'll be angry, and he'll leave. He won't come back. He'll be so upset, and he'll leave. He'll sit on the couch, and he'll laugh. He'll kick you out of my room. He'll be so angry. 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 I was really disappointed when I found out that he was seeing other people. I couldn't believe it, and it made me feel so sad. I was so worried about my mom and dad, and I couldn't stop crying. I was really lonely, and I just wanted to be with them. They were my support system, and I really depended on them. They were the ones who took me to my cursinho and to my school every week. I was really grateful for that. But then, he started to change. He didn't want me to live with him anymore. He called me and said, "Look, if you don't come back to me, I was really sad and felt so alone. I couldn't stop crying, and I was really worried about my mom. I knew she was disappointed in me, but I really wanted to talk to her. I was studying and relying on my friends for transportation, snacks, and other things. At that time, my friends welcomed me, but I still went to my cursinho by myself on foot. I wanted to talk to my mom, but he didn't want me to. He said he would share my personal information on social networks, like MSN, and he did that to all my friends from the cursinho and even my distant family members. He said some really strange things, and I found out that I had relationships not only with him, but also with several other men. Then, everyone at school found out. I felt so alone, like my dad was traveling and my mom wasn't there to support me. He was even trying to blackmail me. But Professor Senores Ali was there for me, and I was really grateful. At the time, I was using social networks like MSN a lot. My friends from school, even distant family members, were getting involved. I had relationships with several men, and my school learned about it. I felt alone, with my dad traveling and my mom not supporting me. The Professor, Senores Ali, was blackmailing me. Professor Senores Ali was the only one who supported me. I just wanted to study and live my life. On a Friday, I was on my way to my school on foot, when he stopped his motorcycle, closed the door, and grabbed me by the arm to get me on the bike. I started screaming for help. The family that knew me saw me and came to my rescue. I got on the bike and came back home. I told my mom, "I know you don't like me, and I'm sorry for your disappointment and anger, but I want to." On a Friday, I was heading to my cousin's house on foot, when a man stopped his motorcycle, grabbed me, and dragged me onto his bike. I started screaming, and my family saw me being rescued. I got back on the bike and went back home. I told my mom, "I know you're upset with me, and I'm sorry, but I'm in danger. He might kill me." And that same week, Eloa was kidnapped and murdered. I was very scared, and my mom saw how worried I was. She called my aunt and said, "We need to get out of here. He's following us." My aunt bought a ticket for me to go to Recife. I was a teenager, just 17 years old, and I was in Recife. I was trying to finish high school, and I had a great grade. I had a lot of fear, and I was very scared. I was desperate, and I saw my aunt when she called my father's sister. She told her, "We need to be careful. Someone is threatening us, and someone is following me." My aunt bought a ticket for me to go to Recife. I had an uncle who lived alone and was a nurse. I was living my life on Friday, going to school and the cursinho on Saturday. I was already going to another state, with only a suitcase in the middle of my high school. I couldn't say goodbye to my dad, and when I got there, my uncle welcomed me. I was in pieces. The family of my ex-boyfriend came to my house, when they learned of the situation. They talked to my parents, who said I wasn't aware of the situation and wanted to move from the neighborhood. My uncle, who lived alone, was a nurse. I was living my life on Friday, going to school and the Cursinho on Saturday. I was already going to another state, with just a suitcase in the middle of my high school, unable to say goodbye to my dad. When I arrived, my uncle welcomed me with open arms. The family of my ex-boyfriend, when they learned of the situation, came to my house. They talked to my parents, who said they weren't aware of the situation and wanted to move from the neighborhood. They said that if he tried to get in touch with me, they would go to the authorities and denounce my presence. Before that, I had provided the ENAM, had done the ENAM proof, and when I was in Recife, I was trying to finish my high school. I saw my grade, which was the maximum grade, so I could choose the institution, course, and location I wanted. I was 17 years old at the time. I spoke, I'm going to put it here. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share my story. At the time, I was 17 years old, and I was determined to make the most of my time in Recife. My team was so supportive, helping me with the registration and ensuring I had everything I needed. The PRON was a dream come true for my family, but I couldn't help but feel a bit distant from my parents. I was away from my brothers, and it wasn't easy. But I kept pushing forward, and I'm so glad I did. I'm going to put it here. I'm so grateful for my course. At the time, I was overwhelmed with nursing. My team helped me with the registration and got me a spot in Prayon's bag. PRON was a huge source of joy for my family, but I couldn't share in the same happiness. I was far away from my parents and brothers, which was my dream, but I wasn't happy. Then I started doing it right. My mother's course was very far from where I lived. I took the Axros Snack College. Anyway, it was all very confusing. I was a teenager living far from my parents. My uncle worked 4 jobs and was very busy. I was a university professor, so I didn't have much time for affection. I had no one to talk to, and I spent the whole weekend in my room crying and sleeping when it finished the first semester. My dear mother, I'm writing to tell you about a time when I was away at college, really far from home. I was struggling with depression and anxiety, and my uncle was working 4 jobs to support us. I was a university professor, but I felt so alone. I had no one to talk to, and I spent the whole weekend crying in my room. When the first semester ended, I asked my mother to come back. I really needed to see you. I needed to see my brothers. But when she came back, my family wasn't there to greet her. I was depressed, so I didn't wake up. I took a shower, but I didn't eat. I went to the emergency room so many times. I was vomiting a lot, and that's when I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. I asked my mother to let me go back, and she let me. I wanted to see you and my brothers. When I came back, my family was there. I was depressed, so I didn't wake up. I took a shower, didn't eat, and went to the emergency room many times. I was vomiting a lot, and I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. I started taking medicine right away. I ended the beasts. I had to go back and clean. I can't go back to her. I was able to come back and take the medications, but I wasn't consistent because I had no mental structure. When I turned 2.5, I was 19 to 20 years old. I said to my mother, I can't take it, but I will be back. She always supported me. I started taking medicine, which helped me get through it. I was able to go back and clean my mother's house in the morning. I couldn't go back to my daughter's dream, but I was able to take the medications. However, I had a hard time keeping it up, because I didn't have a clear mental structure. When I turned 2.5, I was 19 to 20 years old. I told my mother, I can't take it, but I'll be back, and she always supported me. She asked me not to give up, and I said, Mom, I'll be back. I tried another entrance exam, because the bag of prune at that time was not locked. I couldn't transfer to my city, and then I really lost my bag. I came back, and when I came back, I said, Mother, I don't just want to study. I need to work, because I need to have some income to help you have my things. And then I did. I started working as a financial secretary. I asked myself not to give up, and I said, Mom, I'll be back. I tried taking another entrance exam, because the bag of prune at that time wasn't locked. I couldn't transfer to my city, and then I really lost my bag. When I came back, I said, Mom, I don't just want to study. I need to work, because I need to have some income to help you have my things. And then I did. I started working as a financial secretary at my company, and at night, I took the prerequisite entrance exam again. I followed the course, and it was much better than the depression and anxiety I was experiencing with my family. One night, I was home sleeping. I was going to sleep, but I was watching my best friend from that time call me and say, Jessica, let's go with me for a boat ride. I liked the idea. I wanted to go a lot. I said, I'm lying down. I'm not, but she insisted until I was in the company of my closest friend, and we were preparing for the entrance exam. I was feeling a bit anxious, so I decided to take a nap. But my friend wouldn't stop talking. She insisted on going with me to a friend's birthday party. I told her that my mother didn't know about the party, but I didn't want to upset her. I arrived at her mother's house, and she asked me where we were going. I told her that we were going to a birthday party. She asked me if I knew the person who was driving us there, and I said, we're going to the birthday party. I let her know that my mother wasn't aware that I was going to the party, and that we were just going as friends. When I arrived at her mother's, she told me that her mother had left when we were going out for the nightclub. A cousin of hers, whom I didn't know, asked, Where are you going? And I said, We're going to the birthday party. He replied, And you? I said, We're going there, too. He said, My God, he will tell. My mother and I decided to go together, and my cousin called to tell us that we were going to the same place, so we went as a group. I remember finding this person, and my cousin stayed at the table with him. I realized that it wasn't my usual style, but I was very delighted by him. We were on the same boat, and my mother and I were there. My cousin called and said we were going to the same place, so we went together. My mother and I went, and we had a great time. I was very happy, but I didn't want to be in a committed relationship. We talked and danced, and then he left me at home. I went to sleep on Sunday. Then she called me and said, Oh, my cousin was very impressed with you. He wants to talk on the phone. I don't give out my phone number anymore. I wasn't very interested, but she insisted. Eli, I just left her. He gave me a call, and we talked. He called me to leave, and I was upset. After a few days, we left lunch and there we spent a lot of time together, talking, dancing, and just enjoying each other's company. Then, he left me at home and I went to sleep on Sunday. On Monday, she called me and said, Oh, my cousin was very fond of you. He wanted to give you a call, but he wasn't able to. I wasn't very much, but he insisted. Eli, I just left her. He gave me his number, and I called him. We talked for a few days, and then we met for lunch. It was a very pleasant, very polite lunch, and I was very afraid of having a relationship despite having passed many years, but we were involved, and when I saw it was already dating, it was everything very fast. With 3 months, he gave me an engagement ring. Only when he was meeting my parents did he go to pick me up, and my father was there on the sidewalk. He already arrived driving with a glass of wine in his hand, and my father didn't get anything from that scene. I didn't like it. He's a really nice guy, and I was head over heels for him. We dated for a few months, and then he popped the question after 3 months. He was meeting my parents, and he picked me up. My dad was standing on the sidewalk, and he had a glass of vodka in his hand. My dad didn't like it at first, but I knew he drank. He was 15 years older than me, and he was more mature, and had more plans for the future. I thought I had to tell the right person, but he was always traveling with friends or going to parties. My dad didn't let me go with him, and I didn't trust him. After a few months, we wanted to travel together. I had a feeling about it, and sure enough, I found out that he was a heavy drinker. He was 15 years older than me, and he was more mature, and had more plans for the future. I thought I had to tell the right person, but he was always traveling with friends and going to parties. My father didn't trust him, and I was going through a phase where I wanted to travel with him. We didn't live together, and he worked. We went to buy furniture and other things for the house we rented. I went to live with him without my parents' blessing. Everything started out right, and I was very in love with him. After 3 months, I was home and working. Then everything changed because we had a lot. We weren't planning on living together, but we ended up moving in together. We bought furniture for the house we were renting, and I went to live with him. Everything was going well at first, and I was very in love with him. After 3 months, I went back to my job. Then, we had a lot of debt because of the things we bought, like a car and a motorcycle. He got really despondent, and I said, let's not give up. Let's take my insurance and pay what I owe. Let's go back to studying, because I never gave up on studying after returning to college. But he was no longer the same. He started to get stressed about the debt, and he started to get a little distant. With this distance and concern, we had bought a car and a motorcycle, but he was really worried about the debt. I said, let's not give up. I'll take my insurance, and we'll pay for my classes. I'm determined to finish my degree, even though I didn't go to college. But he was stressed about the debt, and he started to distance himself from me. This made me depressed, and I couldn't get out of bed. I cried a lot, and I wasn't taking my medicine regularly. I forgot to take 2 today, but I took 2 tomorrow. After 3 months, I got pregnant. I took a test, and it was positive. When I got home, I told him. He was washing and cleaning the car, and he didn't look at me. I went back to feeling depressed and sedated, and I couldn't break out of that cycle. I was so sad and depressed that I stopped taking my medicines regularly. I forgot to take 2 today, but I finally remembered tomorrow. I got pregnant 3 months later, so I went to get a test, and it was positive. When I got home, I told him, but he didn't react. I was washing and cleaning the car, and he was not looking at me. He said, leave me alone. I'm not well. I can't believe you got pregnant, and then it wasn't planned. I was also scared, and then he spoke about the possibility of adopting an abortion. My son. I felt despair, and then we stopped talking. It was cold. I used silence. The first week that he passed away, he left on Saturday afternoon, and I didn't say anything. I just stayed there, waiting. And then, when he came back, he passed me by. I accelerated. He said, leave me alone. I'm not well. I can't believe you got pregnant, and then it wasn't one. I was scared, and he suggested that we could adopt and give my son a family. I felt despair. We didn't talk much after that. It was cold. I used silence. The first week after he passed away, he left on Saturday afternoon. I won't give 10 or 11 nights of calling him. He doesn't answer. I answered when I felt desperate. I turned on for everyone to know his family. Nobody gave me a ball. Nobody answered me. And if tomorrow he arrives very drunk and nervous, wanting to give me satisfaction, and it once again uses silence, my beginning of pregnancy was very complicated. I got sick so much that I was depressed. I felt anxiety and nausea. I didn't get enough affection or support. Then I was really worried about him, so I called him many times, but he didn't answer. I felt so desperate that I called him back, and he finally answered. I was so happy when I did, but he was still not answering. I felt like no one was there for me, and I was really worried about my unborn baby. If he came home really drunk and nervous tomorrow, I'm worried he'll be upset again. It was really hard for me to get pregnant, and I got sick a lot. I was depressed and felt so lonely. I didn't get any affection or support from him, and it was really hard. Then, on Saturday, he came out, and I was so happy. I said, "You won't leave today, and I won't leave if I have to go there and back." I got out of the car, and I was going back. I took the motorcycle and went after him, looking for us. I was looking for the bars that he used to go to. When I was coming back, I gave up and came back here. He passed me, and I accelerated. He was really suffering, and so was I. On Saturday, I was so tired that I said, "You won't leave today, and I won't either." I knew that if I left, I wouldn't come back. I got out of the car, and I was going back. I took the motorcycle and went after him, looking for the bars he used to go to. When I was coming back, he passed me. I accelerated, and he was in front, driving the car with another shirt. It was a shirt that he had left at home. His friend was in the front seat, and 2 women were in the back. He honked the horn and screamed, and he left. I was already there, in despair, wondering who they were. He drove off at the signal, and I stayed behind. I stopped the motorcycle and vomited a lot. It was bad, but I came home and started calling. Someone answered when I got there. He was driving, and I was a passenger. He was wearing a different shirt than the one he had on when we left. It was a shirt that his friend had left at home. There were 2 women in the front seat, and they were having a lively discussion. He honked the horn, and they screamed and left. I felt a sense of despair, wondering who they were. He drove off with the car at the signal, and I stayed behind. I felt a lot of nausea, but I made it home. I started calling him, and he answered me at 5 a.m. I could hear a sound like a party, and he returned home again, drunk and silent. I went to my 3. My first 3 months of pregnancy were challenging, and then, one Friday, I was passing clothes in the room when he arrived from work. He put his cell phone on the table next to me and went to take a shower. I started talking, saying, "Let's go to the pizzeria. Let's go to the steakhouse." We never left again. I was eager to reconnect, but he was hesitant. We tried to revive our relationship, but it was challenging due to my feelings. Then, his phone rang, and he hurried out of the bathroom, still wet. He greeted me and said, "I'm just saying hi. I don't want to do this to you again." We started to talk, and he left. I said, "I'm going to talk to my mother. I'll go to her house." I left because I wanted to be alone. I was eager to get back together with Collado, but he wasn't showing any interest. I felt like my relationship with him was over, and I couldn't get him to understand. Then, his phone rang, and he hurried out of the bathroom, still wet, and answered the call. He said, "Hi, I'm just checking in." I told him, I don't think we should wait another week. We started to talk about it, and he left. Then, I said, I'm going to go to my mom's house and see if I can sort things out. So, I went to my mom's, and she was kind and supportive at first. I was embarrassed to tell her that things weren't going well. There wasn't much time left, and then I fell apart. My mom said, "You won't go through this again, and I won't either." We went back to my house, and I cried. She picked up my clothes, put them in a suitcase and a garbage bag, and spoke. She said, "You will do this." I took the key, locked the door, and played. I tried to avoid them, but I couldn't. They were there for me at first, and I was grateful. But then, I felt embarrassed to tell you that things weren't going well. Time was passing quickly, and then I fell apart. My mother was upset. I promised that my daughter wouldn't go through the same thing, and I tried to make sure that wouldn't happen. I even went to my house, where I cried and gathered my things. She picked up my clothes, put them in a suitcase and a bag, and spoke. I felt so bad for doing this. I went back to her house, called her, and said sorry. But she didn't answer. I called and called, but she didn't answer. I slept, and when it was 5 o'clock in the morning, she finally answered. She said she was home. I said I left home, I saw her, and I came back home. I saw F, but I was sorry. I said, "Come, I'm not managing to sleep." He said he wasn't sleeping either. I put my hand on the door, and at the same time, I already felt sorry for what I had done. I went back to her house, calling his name, but he didn't answer. I called and called, but he didn't answer. It was 5 o'clock in the morning when he finally answered, and he said, "Hi. I left home. I saw me. I got home now, and saw you. I'm sorry. Come. I'm not managing to sleep." He said he wasn't sleeping either. Then, we talked for a while, and he calmed me. I slept when I woke up. He knocked on my mother's door. He said he was sorry, but he didn't want to do this, and he didn't look at me. He said he didn't love me anymore, and that there was no more love between us, as we had seen together. He said he wanted to stay in the house, and that he didn't want to leave me. I'm grateful. I love you. I want my family, but I don't love you. The quiet made me feel so much better. I slept when I woke up, and when he knocked on my mother's door, I was so grateful. I didn't want to do this, and he didn't look like he loved me. There was no more as we saw together, and he didn't leave me. I'm so thankful. I love my family, but I don't love you. I made this child, and he said I didn't love you enough to live with you. I'm sure there's a hand that supports me. I knelt at his feet, and he didn't humiliate me like this. He was very ugly, and he was with me through my endless sadness. I was at my parents' house, homeless, unemployed, very depressed, pregnant, and he followed his life. Then he kept leaving, continued to live. I made this child, and he said he didn't love me enough to live with me. He said he wouldn't miss the support I gave him. I'm sure he was embarrassed by my hand on his knee. I knelt at his feet, and he didn't humiliate me like this. He was very ugly, and he was with me during my endless sadness. I was pregnant and homeless, unemployed, and very depressed. He followed his life, and he kept leaving. I wish it was the single life, right? He didn't see me during my pregnancy. There were many trips to the hospital, because I was dehydrated. I couldn't eat anything but water, and I cried. My mother was desperate. My mother always went to all prenatal consultations with me. My dad also supported me. He also set up the entire trousseau for my son. He made the whole room stronger. It was horrible, and I was hoping to make him choose. I wish he had been able to see my son. He didn't see me during my pregnancy, and I was really dehydrated because I wasn't eating. I was in the hospital a lot, and my mother was really worried. My father was there for me, and he helped me prepare for my son's arrival. He was really supportive, and he made sure I had everything I needed. He didn't see me with my big belly, and he didn't see my son when he was born. When I started having labor, my mother called him and asked if he wanted to see his son. He said yes, and she said, "Then you'll pay for everything, okay?" I was responsible for my daughter's bar, but he would have to pay for his visit. I couldn't be normal, so I went to a C-section. My connection with my son was a bit rocky at first. When he was born, he was in the NICU, and I was sedated. It wasn't until hours later that I was able to see him. When I opened my eyes, I saw my son in his father's arms. I was disappointed that my father didn't want to see his son, but he was understandably hesitant after what had happened. It took some time for him to be able to contact his son. I had a few complications, but I'm grateful I was able to see my son born, because I was sedated. A few hours later, I opened my eyes and saw my son in his father's arms. My father didn't want to see him, but he eventually came around. It took some months for him to be able to contact his son. He bought diapers that needed to be changed and saw his son on the sidewalk outside the house. He saw the son, who was inside with his father. My father was a great support system for me, and he helped me get through it. My son came to my parents' house, and I continued to stay there at the hospital for childbirth with depression. I was only in bed, but I was making every effort. I was breastfeeding my mother, who was bathing my mother, who made. My father was a kind and loving man. He bought diapers for our son, who was at home. He saw the son on the sidewalk outside of house, and he felt a sense of hope. However, the time went by, and my father passed away. My heart was heavy, and I felt a sense of sadness. The son came to my parents' house, and I continued to stay there at the PO. I was dealing with depression, and I was only able to get out of bed to breastfeed my mother, bathe her, and do everything for her. My mother was a kind and loving woman who did everything for my family. She was there with me when my son was 8 months old. My friend, who was his cousin, called and asked to go out for a while. I told her, "It's just for fun at home. Let's go out for a party." I asked my parents, who left. I went to the party, where I met the father of my son. He wanted to stay with my son, and I asked where our son was. My mother was a wonderful woman who always took care of everything. She was there with my son when he was 8 months old. One of my friends, who was also his cousin, called and asked if we could go out. She said there was nothing at home, so let's go to a party. I asked my parents, and they left. I went to the party, where I met the father of my son. He wanted to stay with my son, so I asked where he was. We went to my sister's house, where we spent the night dancing. I thought, my God, he has softened my heart. I will have my family. I always dreamed that we would spend the night together. He left me at home, and I came back happy and full of hope. I called him and said, "Look, let's go to the pharmacy and buy some things." We were able to buy some things for our son, and he came to visit. I was so happy, and I was in his car. I was very happy, but in the middle of the way, his phone rings. He answers, and I see that it's a woman. He answers and speaks with her, as if they were not in a car, but marking a date. He starts to cry, and I understand that he only wants to be with her. We would not go back, and then he left me at home. Some things in our son's life have been challenges, but we've been able to work through them together. He came to visit me, and I was really happy. I was just happy that, in the middle of the way there, his phone rang. He answered, and I saw that it was a woman. He started talking to her, acting like it wasn't a date, and he started to cry. I understood that he was just trying to get through it. Then he left me at home, and I started feeling depressed again. I cried, and when my son was about to turn 1, my mother came home and saw me lying down. She didn't get up right away. She said, "You need to react. You need to do something in your life. Life isn't limited to a single end." Then we ate and talked. In my head, she wasn't understanding. She knew I had depression, and I had no strength to react. But that checked. My mother gave me there. I was feeling really down when I got home, and I couldn't seem to find the energy to do anything. I was thinking about my son, who was about to turn 12. I was worried that he might be disappointed in me, but I couldn't do anything about it. My mother came home and saw me lying down, and she said, "You need to get up and do something with your life. You're not going to live forever, and you need to start making the most of it." She knew about my depression, and she wanted me to get up and be strong. I got up, and I was a little embarrassed, but I felt like I had to do it. I left my son with a friend, and I went to the city to deliver some resumes. I was trying to start over, and it felt like I was starting from the beginning. But everything got worse from there. The first store I went into was a fancy sandals and shoe store, and it was really beautiful. There was a man at the counter, and he was really nice. I went up to him and said, "You are interviewing?" He said, "You are?" I got up and impressed some of the other applicants. I left my son with a friend and went to the city to deliver my resume, and then I started my life anew. So far, my life has been okay despite everything, but from that moment on, my life begins at the beginning. Right away, it would be the worst. In the first store I entered, it was a Sandalias store, which sold shoes and bags. It was a very beautiful store with a salesperson at the counter. I arrived and said, "I'm here for an interview." He spoke and said, "We are hiring people. We will even have an interview tomorrow if you are interested." I said, "My data is marked here as a potential interview." I delivered the resume to a few more stores and went home. The other day, I woke up early. I had no clothes, no makeup, and no vanity. I got there as it opened and followed the shopping list for the interview. When I arrived, I saw a daughter of 12 girls, all beautiful and wearing makeup. I will not. I'm so excited to share that I had an interview for a job the other day. I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to share my story and show them what I can do. I was a little nervous, but I kept my cool and nailed it. I told them about my situation as a single mother, and they were kind and understanding. They offered me a chance, and I was so thankful. I waited in the corner while they finished the interview with the other girls and took their test. I was so excited when I got the chance to interview for the job. The owner of the store asked me to describe myself, and I did my best to do so. I told him that I was a single mother, and he said that he'd give me a chance. I asked him to wait in the corner while I finished the interview with the other girls, and he agreed. While I was waiting, I called my mother and asked her to take care of my son. Then, I started the tests. The store manager told me, "You'll have to come back for a makeup session. We need to see the luxury article, so you have to come back." I said, "It's all right. I'll be there." I called my mother, bought some makeup, and started the test. I gave it my all, knowing I had to reach my goal within the first 3 months. At that time, I called my mother and asked her to take care of my son while I was away. I waited for him to finish, and then I started the tests. The store manager told me, "Look, you will have to come jump makeup. We need to see the article of luxury, so you have to come." I replied, "It's right, tidy, okay. Then I called my mother. I bought some makeup, jumped in, and started the test. I gave everything I had. I knew I had to beat the goal in the first 3 months. I hit the goal, and then it was just that. I worked on the hours from 4 to 10 p.m., and I lived far away from the store, so I arrived home at 10:40 p.m. Every day, I was seeing my son. One morning, I had to organize my son. Taking care of the house was very busy, but everything was okay. I was overcoming my depression, and I was getting by with an income from 3 stores. This shoe store and bag store, a clothing store, and a travel agency were all familiar to me. I worked at a store that was one of a kind. His mother and sister were in charge of the store, and his sister lived in New York. I took a MOD course in New York, and she came back to our city. I always made sure to see her. I was working at a shoe store that was really close to a bag store. There was also a store that sold clothes and more. In the front, there was a travel agency and a tourism agency. I worked at a store that sold travel and tourism stuff. One of the people who worked there was his mother and sister. His sister lived in New York. I took a course in New York, so I never had seen her. She came back to our city, and I always made sure everything was tidy. I tidied up the shoe store, because it was my job. When she arrived, I was really scared. I said, "Oh my God, who made this showcase?" Then we said, went to Jessica. She said a lot. It was very polite, very kind. I was amazed. I was already fragile, and I started to cry. I was fragile, because I was very tired of this routine, and my son was still very small. Then I cried and called the manager. I said, I tidied up from the shoe store, and I made my own way. When she arrived, my God, who made this showcase? And then we said, I went to Jessica, and then she said a lot. It was very polite, very kind, and I was amazed. I was already fragile, right? I started to cry, because I was tired of this routine, and the time was right. My son was still very small, and then I cried and called the manager. I said, I won't go. I won't be able to. Then she worried, because it was one of the salespeople who sold the most at the time. She was one of the largest salespeople in the store. She called the store owner and spoke to her like this, "Jessica, you're crying," and said it would leave for it. This time, he didn't call me. When I got there, he didn't go up. He didn't call me. I summarized, he doesn't worry. My sister, she badly comes. I'm not going to go, so I won't be able to. And more. She was worried, because it was one of the salespeople who sold the most at the time. She was one of the store's top salespeople. She called the store owner and said, "Jessica is crying, and she says it will leave for it." He didn't call me when I got there. He didn't go up when I got there. I summarized what happened. He doesn't worry about my sister. She really likes you. Everyone here likes your work. I have plans for you in management, so don't give up. When the time is right, you will change. It's better for you to place yourself from 9 at 4 p.m. I did a lot, and this was many years ago, like 20, right? With all the stores, then everyone wanted this time. Then, when he exchanged me, the world was not understanding. Hey, I just wanted to let you know that I'm really impressed with your work. Everyone here, including me, really appreciates what you do. I've got some great plans for you in terms of management, so don't let yourself get down. I'm sure that if you keep at it, you'll see some really positive changes. I'm sure it's tough, but try to find time to rest and recharge. I know it's a lot to handle, but I'm here for you. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've learned a lot. I've been working with JESC for 6 months now, and I can tell you that the time has flown by. You'll have to arrive much sooner, and you'll have to be ready to hit the ground running. I've always been able to open Nova on time, and I've always been there early because I've been managing the cash flow and sending emails from the store. I'd always make coffee and take it with me when I was there. We'd talk while I was getting organized. It was always just 10 minutes before opening time, and I'd be there early, ready to go. JESC has been coming for 6 months now, and everything has changed. You'll have to arrive much sooner. Wings, it takes 8 hours to make coffee, organize the shop, clean everything, and prepare for opening. Nova has no problem, and he always arrived earlier, because he had cash flow. He'd send emails from the store, so I'd always make coffee and take it with me. We'd talk while I organized it. It was only 10 minutes before the store opened, and he'd arrive early and leave late. He was always there every day, paving the way. My son started working on his life. He was separating, and then we realized that the situation came from singing. We looked at Jessica too, and the owner of the store, our boss, was talking to you. I'll warn you that he already had a case with some employees here from the store. He was married to his wife, and he discovered it was I'm heading out for a meeting with the scribe later, so I'll be there every day. I was thinking about my son. He started working on his life, and then we realized that the situation came from singing. The owner of the store, our boss, is talking to you. I'll have to warn you that he already had a problem with some employees here from the store. He found out that his wife was cheating on him, and that ended up with her getting fired. I know you need a lot, so I'm not going to lie to you. I made a mistake. It's not good, but I started to notice that he was coming to the store earlier, bringing snacks and coffee. Anyway, he wanted to know how I was doing. My son was just trying to get to know me. I didn't want to give him a lot of credibility in that situation, and then it passed. So, months later, the girls of the LF, I'm so happy to tell you that Mina was fired. I know you need a lot, so I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I made a mistake. I noticed that he was coming to the store earlier to bring snacks and coffee. He wanted to know how I was doing. My son was just trying to be helpful. I didn't want to give him too much credit, and then it passed. So, Jessica will have a party here in the neighboring city. Let's go. I work. Son, I'll see if my mother lets me. I said, my mother left. And I said, but I opened the store the other day in the morning, right before the party. The manager and the girls will be there. We'll organize and talk to Mina, who works at night, in the afternoon and at night. You work for her today, and tomorrow she works for her. So, Jessica is throwing a party in the next city. Let's go, I said. I work, son. I said, I'll check if my mother lets me go. I said that my mother left, and I said, but I opened the store the other day in the morning. The party will be bad there. The manager and the girls miss like that. We organize, we talk to Mina, who works at night, in the afternoon and at night. You work for her today, and tomorrow she works for you in the morning. Warn her, okay, only that when I left, I didn't. I went to the store, and the cameras showed that I continued. He was still there, and then he called the manager, and asked why you didn't go away. She told him, no way. It's not how it works. By someone else who doesn't know Tina. The opening of the store is to open. I am going there, and he gets there, begins no. No, Jitsa will open the store tomorrow. And I said, oh. In the morning, I let you know that I'd be working. You said, no, you'll have to work. I'll work, too, and there. I noticed that he didn't want me to go to the party, but I went anyway. It was a horrible, tiring night. I came home super early and slept another day. I woke up, got ready to go to work, and my phone buzzed. It was him. He said, "You're at home, and I'm getting ready to go to work. You came from what I did. I'm going by. I'm not going to say no, even if I'm not sure what I'm doing. I'll go with you to the bus, but I'll have to drive. I'll pick you up and we'll go together. I thought I gave you the address, but I guess I didn't. I'll go with you to the boss's office. He'll be there when you get there. He'll have a coconut water snack for you. I don't drink that, but it'll help with your hangover. I'm fine." We talked while we waited for the bus. We got there really early. He stopped in the parking lot and started. He said, "I'll take the bus." I said, "No, I'd rather drive. You'll arrive late, so I'll pick you up in my car. Just give me your address." I thought I had given it to him, but I guess I didn't. He arrived, and he greeted me warmly. I said, "I'm fine, thank you. I don't drink alcohol, but I'm good with that." We talked while we waited, and when it was time, we arrived super early. He stopped in the parking lot and started. There was a girl there who was in love with me. She was an intelligent, amazing warrior. In that moment, I always had difficulty saying no, and I didn't react to anything. I just looked at him, so scared. He declared and came to kiss me, and I kissed him back. I don't know why I didn't say no. Anyway, at that time, I didn't understand, but now I do. I stayed calm, and then we left and went. There was this guy who was head over heels for me. He was a smart, amazing warrior. In that moment, I always had difficulty saying no, and I didn't react at all. I just looked at him, so scared. He declared his love for me and came to kiss me, and I kissed him back. I didn't know how to say no. Anyway, at that time, I didn't understand, but now I do. I stayed quiet, and then we left and went to work. He started acting like he really loved me and said, "It's a lot of time on the bus. You spend a lot of time away from home. I will stay here and leave my home." And that's how we started a relationship. I never started. I had flowers in my life, and I got a huge bouquet of his handwritten letters. I got a lot of his gifts, including lunch. Then, I was in these things, and the store girls and the manager started suspecting right away. Once again, she alerted. He started acting like he was in love with me. He said, "I'm a lot of time on the bus. You spend a lot of time away from home. I will stay and leave at home." And so we started a relationship. I had flowers in my life, and I had a huge bouquet of his handwritten letters. He gave me a gift, lunch, and then I was in trouble. The store girls and the manager started suspecting me, and once again, she alerted him. If you have some case with him, I have to alert." I denied. No one knew, nobody, neither friend nor mother nor father. And then I was staying with him, and I was living there, living a dream. I never had not only gifts and flowers. A man who praised me, right, and made plans for our life. And then one day, I was working, I bought lunch at the mall. I felt that the food was not very good, but I ate it. I'll tell you what happened. I had a bad experience with him. I was staying with him, and it was a dream come true. We were living together, and he was always praising me and making plans for our lives. Then one day, I went to the mall to buy lunch. I didn't like the food, but I ate it anyway. I was really bad. I asked to leave, but he wouldn't let me. He always took me to the mall. Next time, I left, stunned. I stopped shopping and went to the bathroom. I started vomiting. I had a nosebleed, and he came to help me. I had a nosebleed from all the shopping and cleaning. He rescued me because my pressure dropped. I passed out and vomited. He called me because I was vomiting with everything. He got me and I was really bad. I asked to leave, but he insisted on taking me to the hospital. I was discharged and left, stunned. I went home and stopped at the bathroom on the way. I started vomiting, and my pressure dropped. He helped me clean up the bathroom and called for help. He took me to the hospital. I didn't get to go shopping. The girl who is here is lying on the bathroom floor. She's going wrong. She enters the shopping center with a security guard. The security guard takes me in his arms and takes me to the hospital. The security guard saw the situation and went to the store. They didn't work. The people spoke like this: "Look at the holder." Jessica got sick in the bathroom, and the owner of the store took her to the hospital. If she had doubts, she confirmed. I didn't get to go shopping, so the girl who is here is lying. The bathroom is going wrong. Enter the shopping, which comes with a brigade. Security takes me in my arms and takes me to the hospital. Security saw the situation and went to the store. They didn't work. Cham people spoke like this: "Look at the holder." In Jessica, she got sick in the bathroom, and the owner of the store took her to the hospital. If she had doubts, she confirmed. At that moment, we were together, and then I arrived at the hospital, passing very badly. The private clinic called my mother, who went to get me at home. My mother had never seen me, and she didn't even know what was happening. I'm pregnant. I don't believe it, but I'm not pregnant. I just got sick. I'm with a food infection, and she was hospitalized. He is very concerned. He introduced himself to my mother, offering her support. I was discharged. At that moment, we were together, and then I arrived at the hospital, passing very poorly. The private clinic called my mother to come get me, and she went to get me from home. I was pregnant, but I didn't even know what was happening. I was not pregnant, but I was feeling sick. I didn't believe it, but I'm not pregnant. I just got food poisoning, and he was very concerned. He introduced himself to my mother to offer support. I was discharged. I was hated. I came home, and then when I came back to the store, I realized that I had stopped being their friendly employee and become the boss's girlfriend. No one else talked to me. We were very upset with me. I don't know what happened. I don't know if she liked him, or if it was really an exchange with me. I know she started treating me badly. I started not being dear to the store, and then I didn't tell. I was really disappointed. When I came back to the store, I realized that I had stopped being their friendly employee and become the boss's girlfriend. No one else spoke to me, and we were all really upset with me. I don't know what happened, if she liked him, or if it was really an exchange with me. I know she started treating me badly, and I started acting distant from the store. Then, I didn't tell him, but he realized that I was being played, so he had a meeting with everyone. He talked about the meeting, the store, and so on. I have something to tell you, and I am a boyfriend from the Jetic Mall store. I'm an outsider, so nothing changes, but I'm going to talk to her. It's my girlfriend. Someone has something to say about Elm. Even his mother was at this meeting. He realized that I was being taken advantage of, so he scheduled a meeting with everyone. He spoke about the meeting, the store, and himself. I have something to tell you, and I am a boyfriend from the Jetic Mall. I'm an outsider, but nothing changes. Someone has something to say about Elm. Even his mother was at the meeting. I was very surprised to be there, and I felt shocked. At that moment, I requested to date him, even though I didn't know right away. From that moment on, he assumed me, and he has no more store sellers like this. The boss always speaks. Finally, he had the chance to tell me if I wanted to tell him, but I didn't want to continue working. Then, he met my son, and he said he is our son. He was already married, and he had 2 children, a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old boy. They lived. I was so surprised to be there, and I was worried about my son. I asked him to go with me, and he said yes. He was so kind and loving to my son, and he was the only one who did that. He was always there for my son, and he made me feel like I was his son too. He even met my son, and he said he was like a son to him. My son was living with his mom in Sao Paulo, and he was really affectionate with my son. We left for a trip, and he was so loving to my son. He was showing him what a father should be like, and my son really looked up to him. He was showing me his love in the most beautiful way, and he surprised us with a trip. I was living all the things I never imagined. I was starting to see some signs, and I was starting to feel like everything was going to be okay. In Sao Paulo, Sao Bernardo is with his mother, and he is now our son. He was very affectionate with my son. We left for a trip to the playground. He was a loving father figure to my son, which I hadn't experienced before. He surprised us with a trip and beautiful, handwritten letters. He was living everything I had only imagined. One day, we were together and a friend of mine greeted me. He said, "You know, he's already changed his behavior around you." I apologize for knowing a person and greeting a person on my cell phone. I had just broken my phone, so I got a new one. It came with the box still open. I gave him a lot of ball. We spent the night together, and if I arrived home, I had to use the phone. For example, we were together and passed by a friend of mine. I greeted him and said, "Hey, I know you're not here to talk, so I'll just say hi and get out of your way." I saw myself apologizing for knowing a person and greeting him. My cell phone broke, so I got a new one. I was so excited that I spent the whole night talking to him. But when I got home, I had to turn off the phone. I didn't want to talk to him, so I just fell asleep. The next day, I looked at my cell phone and saw that I had received a message from him. I felt like I couldn't stop talking to him, so I fell asleep with my son. My son was a baby, and I was using my phone in silence. One day, I was talking to him, and I think it was midnight. I had slept for 11 hours, and I was still awake. The other day, I looked at my cell phone and saw that I had received a message from him. I had never seen so many messages from him. I was talking to him on the phone for hours, but eventually I got tired of it. I fell asleep with my phone in my hand, and when I woke up, I realized I had slept for hours. I was so connected to my phone that I even looked at it 7 hours before I went to bed. I've sent around 200 text messages and made a few phone calls. I was a little scared when he called me, but I answered, and he started talking. I said, "Okay, if you're okay with it, I'd like to see you now." Then I realized I was knocking on my door, and I went to my bedroom in my pajamas. "I spent the night there, calling you on your door. I made a mistake. I was sleeping, not your cell phone. I've had so many messages in my life, and most of them were from calls." I was a bit scared when I got a call from him. I answered, and he started talking. I said, "What's going on?" "I'm okay. I want to see you now." I realized I was knocking on my door, and then I went there in my pajamas. "I was there when you were calling me at night. I spent the night here, on your doorstep. I made my God. I was sleeping, not your cell phone. You were on the phone, and it was late. I was just like you. My cell phone showed you where I was. I had put a GPS tracker on my phone. At that moment, I went to my son's room and asked for his forgiveness. He was sleeping with his cell phone on silent. He smiled and showed me his true self, telling me off and changing. I was like this without processing or understanding. I apologized. I said you were on the avenue at such a time. I'm not sure, but as I recall, my cell phone showed that you were at home. He had put the GPS on my phone, and at that moment, I asked for my son's forgiveness. I was sleeping with my son, who had my phone in his room. He smiled and showed me his true self, telling me he was sorry and that he had changed. I was shocked and in disbelief. I apologized, saying I was sleeping. There was no way out of the house, and then he left. Soon afterwards, he arrived at my house with breakfast in a basket and apologized. He said he would be my assistant, because he loved me so much. I was so in love, never having experienced this before. He was about 15 years older than me, and I left right away. If he really was very in love with me, I didn't see that. I couldn't sleep at all. I couldn't find a way out of the house, and then he left and soon afterwards arrived at my house with breakfast in a basket and apologized. He said he would be my assistant, because he loved me so much. I had never been in love before, and he was about 15 years older than me. I left right away, because I thought he was very in love with me, but I didn't see that. It was a different problem every day, for some short reason at Red Social, by a message from a friend or a friend. Finally, my mother freaked out, and when I had to contact my son's father, he gave everything for my son, so I didn't try to contact him as much as possible. If we followed him, his stepfather was new, separating his mother. He was a very successful person here. Each day brought a new challenge, and sometimes it felt like everything was changing overnight. My mother was really worried, and when I had to talk to my son's father, it was a bit of a shock. I decided to keep my son's life as normal as possible, and I didn't want to contact his father too much. If we look back, his stepfather was doing a great job of keeping his mother and son apart. He was a very successful businessman in the region, and he made a lot of money. But the family's quality of life was really affected by the separation. It was only after the separation and the division of assets that they started sharing everything. That's when the stores really took off. The store sold luxury items like expensive bags and sandals, but they didn't really fit my style. I'm a huge rocker, and I have tattoos from neck to shoulder. Customers were more interested in my left, right then. The region's stores were doing well, and the community was thriving. The separation of goods brought a new sense of sharing and togetherness. My ex, a huge rocker with tattoos from his neck to his toes, was a regular at the store. He brought customers from Nicho da Gente, and he was a management graduate, so he was in charge of accounting. On a Saturday, my ex's stepfather passed away. He had a mystical side and passed away, leaving my ex-mother-in-law and me in mourning. The whole inventory and sharing of goods process involved other daughters, who were not at the store. She knew the city, and she brought the customers of Nicho da Gente. He was a management graduate, so he was in charge of the accounting. On a Saturday, the stepfather of my ex passed away. He had a mystical aura and passed away, and my ex-mother-in-law and ex-MILF were, of course, devastated. They were in mourning, but the whole inventory and sharing process involved other daughters, who were not. They focused 100% on this situation and resolving the sharing. He was aware of the stores and knew of management, but he didn't know of the collection that Sense liked. It was kind of like it was only for him and me to solve this situation. I have no experience in public service. And then her mother came to our city from Sao Paulo and Fortaleza. Little came to our city, and the stores started to enter crisis. There were 3 stores in the mall, one in another. I'm so sorry for your loss. I know it's hard to take in, but I'm here to help. I'm going to talk to my mother, who is in charge of the stores. I'm going to explain to her that you're welcome to stay here, and that I'm going to help her out. I'm going to do this because I care, and because I'm the only one who can help. I'm going to take care of everything, and I'm going to make sure that you're safe. I'm going to make sure that you're safe, and that you have everything you need. I'm going to take care of everything, and I'm going to make sure that you're safe. The city started. I closed the tourism business, then the shoe store. At the same time, my grandmother, who adopted my mother, was sick. My grandfather had already passed away many years ago, and my mother speaks like this: Jessica, my mother has bone cancer, and she's really weak. I need to bring her here to the city, to my mother's house. I had 3 bedrooms, my room, my parents' room, my son's room, and my brother's room, where they stay with his boyfriend. I have to welcome my mother to a larger apartment, so I have to set up a new place. I won't do that. I won't get to him and say, let's go live together. I don't want that. I won't do that. So I'll talk to him. He will understand that it's not forced. He will understand that it's an appeal of the mother. Then she contacted him and spoke. So you can welcome Jessica, and I'm so excited to welcome my mother to her new home. I'm going to set up a place for her and my son, and I'm going to talk to him. I'm sure he'll understand that it's not a forced move. He'll see that it's an appeal from my mother. She contacted him and spoke. So you can welcome Jessica and her son. I'm going to welcome my mother and my son. He is not clear. I wanted a lot of time. He really had a request for me to go to Mara. I already realized these behaviors of his. I always spoke no longer ahead, and then I saw in that situation where I took my son. He furnished the room, so my son has his dream room. He bought everything new. So, see living here. He lived in a gated community, and I went to live with him, but thus making my son was really worried about something, and I could tell. He asked me to go to Mara, and I understood why. I had already noticed these behaviors. I always spoke to him, but he didn't listen. Then, I saw that he had furnished the room with my son's dream toys, and bought every toy he could. He lived in a gated community, and I went to live with him, but it was only a temporary solution. It was only until my grandmother recovered. Okay. Then, living with him made things worse, because I had no contact with anyone. I lived there from the store, and it was a lot of pressure for our home. Every time I went to the store, he was with me, and he started taking my cell phone every night. He checked my phone for messages and calls. I was always sleeping. It was so clear to me that it was just a matter of time before my grandmother got better. But then, living with him became really hard. I didn't talk to anyone anymore. I was living there at the store, and it was really hard for our family. Every time I went out, he was with me, and he checked my phone every night. He read my messages and looked at my contacts. He asked me who these people were, and I told him. I was always sleeping. I had to be there for him. First, they closed the travel agency, then the Sapa store, and then we got a lot of debt, because we couldn't pay the suppliers and had a lot of labor debt, too. I didn't look much, because it was getting worse, and even though I saw him a lot, I was really worried. Then I asked him, how is it? I woke up one morning and realized that things weren't going as well as I'd hoped. I had to take responsibility for everything. The store started closing, first the travel store, then the Sapa store, and we accumulated a lot of debt. I couldn't keep up with the expenses of the suppliers and labor, and I felt overwhelmed. I didn't look much, because it was overwhelming, and I saw him looking worried. I asked him, "What's going on?" "It's a difficult situation." I prayed to God, and then he arrived for me. I entered the moto club, but as if you don't even ride a motorcycle, you have Moto L. No. It's my whole refuge. The world is my friend. I feel good there. I thought it was a place where you could leave it a little in peace, and then he started not paying even the critic is a critical part of my life. I made my God, and then in my time, he arrived for me and said, I entered the club at Moto Club. I did, but as if you don't even ride a motorcycle, you have Moto L. No. There is my whole refuge. The world is my friend. I feel good there. Okay. I thought it was a place so that it is left a little in peace, and then he started not to pay even the rent. The mall store started to stay empty. It was a ball of N, and the mother was fully focused on mourning. In this situation of inventory, to the end, and then the cuddles began to disappear, because I had no new collection. We could not buy a new collection. I kind of started to worry about that situation, and I had to send away and not. We managed to pay everything, and he quiet right began to go to more and more Moto Club. I started questioning, because the store was doing well, but then it started to lose its luster. I had saved some money, and I had a new collection that I was excited about. But then it just stopped happening. I started to worry, and I had to send away the things that I didn't need. I started to feel like something was falling apart, and I didn't know how to fix it. I went to the headquarters of the Fortaleza Club in Fortaleza, and I saw that it was very well organized. There were lawyers and people who were passionate about motorcycles. I didn't know that the headquarters here was not the same. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the same thing, but I was wrong. I thought we were all doing the it says the house is falling, and you don't know. I'm PR Fortaleza, and I know the headquarters of this Fortaleza club. When I arrived, I saw that it was very well organized. There were lawyers and people who gathered there for love of motorcycles. The headquarters here was not so, and the mamos who gathered to drink and use were not there. Damn, I didn't know. I thought marrying, there would be the same principle of there and here, and then the rude things he missed. I had an idea, let's open a new popular store in the city center. Everything was new, and I was a fan who knew. Then we can govern and pay these accounts. He has to have his name, because I don't have a clean name anymore. I don't have more credit on the bank. He was organized, and everything was set up in my name with CPJ. I had one until I got there, and it was already 3 years old. I had a relationship, and then I had money saved. I had this great idea to open a new, popular store in the city center. I'm a big fan of the idea, so I called him. We could govern and pay these accounts. He has to have his name on it, because I don't have a clean name anymore. I don't have more credit on the bank. He was organized, and he had everything set up in my name with CPJ. I had one loan, and it was 3 years old when we got there. I had saved some money, and then we set up the store in the city center. We had a popular fashion store, and it was a great idea. I said I would stay responsible for store service, and he said, okay. I was going to work, and he didn't go to the store. The office had already closed, so I worked from home. I had 2 salespeople, and I attended to WhatsApp. The store was very beautiful. We made the store different, and then we had all the money. I gathered all the money I could, and we set up the store in the city center, where there was a lot of foot traffic. I said, I'll be responsible for store service, and you get stars. And he was like, okay. I was going to work, but he didn't go to the store. The office had already closed, so I worked from home. I had 2 salespeople, and I was on WhatsApp. The store was very beautiful, and we had a store that was different from the others. I would take home all the money from the box at night. I took his hand, and I realized that at that moment, we had to worry about covering the expenses, because the cost was very high. He was like, okay, follow me. We were selling, and we were getting there. I said, keep at least the store open one day. I came to work and switched on the energy. I said, hours out. Everyone was with energy, just not me. Then I saw the little paper with the warning of cut. I called him. I'm not sure what happened, but I know I didn't cut the energy. I'm not able to pay the bill from the DIS store if it's not possible, and I don't have a lot of money in my account. You don't understand. You think it's very easy, but every day, he went to get this motorcycle in the afternoon. Later, he started going in the morning, at night, and then in the morning. And then he said, we'll sell our. At home, we're thinking of selling the house that I own. I'm the one paying the bills, but it's not enough. I'm asking for a day, a night, a right to stay in my home, deliver, and how it's having no energy. Let's pay the energy bill. He didn't have the money to pay it, and then I saw myself, nation. I have to close in. I thought it was only temporary, that it was only the time for me to pay this energy. I discovered that I also had delayed the rent for the suppliers of the new. The store was healthy, but he wasn't managing it. I had no idea what was going on with the money. Then it hit me. A depression managed to sell the house and said that it had paid the bills. But it took so long to sell the house that it no longer made sense. I had already requested it, and the supplier was in debt to one employee, so it was a big deal. He said, I don't know what I will. Hey, let's take these clothes that have been left behind and sell them in the Fortaleza market. You took care of the bills, and I took care of the car. We went to the market at cost price, practically giving the items away. It was a lot of work, and not all of it was conversion work. We worked hard, and I made the sale. They just took the money. I called 2 people to help me. He was kind enough to travel with me and pay for my stay. He was also kind enough to pay my pension, but it was a bit too high, so I was a bit worried about it. I stayed in this hotel to pay my account and stop my son's accounts. I knew that he had taken a credit right in my name, taken a credit card, and not paid for it. I received interest notifications, and I felt despair. Then, we returned to the hotel, and there was no money, but he told me firmly and strongly in this club. One night, he arrived at the club quite tipsy, wanting me to wake up and make a barbecue in the morning. I was a bit annoyed, as I was still tired. We started talking, and he asked me not to go to the club with him. He said he wanted us to have a job, and he spoke so strongly that I felt like there was no way for me to work for anyone. I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm starting a new business. Please be patient, I'll think about it, and let's open a new business together. I did, but he didn't care about money or names. We moved out of our house and into his mother's house, which was a big house with 7 bedrooms. It was a lot to clean and organize, and I couldn't even work, because he didn't accept it. I got depressed and passed away. When he arrived at night, he only came at dawn. The club changed, and I wanted to have sex with you. Up wanted me to take it together with him. I asked him, and he looked at me with a frown. He didn't accept my opinion right away. I didn't want to give my 2 cents, and I didn't want him to give his opinion on what I should do. I was happy to take care of his children, who came from São Bernardo, PR, our city. I was in love with his children, and I tried to soften the situation. They always came here, and they always went on restaurant trips. Things were really hard, but I always tried to make their birthday special. I did what I could, even though it was really difficult. I tried to focus on one relationship at a time, but it didn't work. I fell into depression for the first time, and it was the first time I turned to my son in São Paulo for support. My mother was always more present in my life than my father, and then he left for the club, and everything changed. I lost track of time. When I realized I was in the process, he arrived and saw everything closed. He had cameras in the house, and I think he saw everything on them. Then he broke into the door and took what he could. I always asked to go to the psychologist, but he always denied it because he knew that if I were to go, I understand where you're coming from. I had a relationship that was really hard for me. I felt so dependent on him, and it was really hard to break free. He never fully accepted me, and that made things really difficult. At one point, he called my parents and asked them to take me to see El Pro psychologist. He wanted to see a psychiatrist, so we went together. He came with me to the psychiatrist's office, and the psychiatrist gave me some medications. I tried to do what the psychiatrist said, but it was really hard. I could have done this on my own, but he was the one who was in control. It was a very strong medicine, both to sleep and to wake up. So that was my routine. He woke me up and gave me the medicine to wake up. He was there. In the afternoon, he gave me the remedy again. I slept, and it went to the moto club. I only woke up when I was voted at dawn. I characterized rape, because I am not me, not when I woke up. He was like that on top of it, and I questioned them. No, but you said yes. You agreed and then you went. I realize that the little money that came in was always for his mother's help, or something he did for business. It was never for paying the basic home expenses. I don't live money, and I couldn't work. I spent time. I started taking medication this year. I didn't live, and I don't have memory, because I was very covered. He was the one who gave me the idea to sleep and wake up. My mother was really concerned about me, and that's when he started pushing me away from my family. If I mentioned that I wanted to see my mother or son, he would make excuses, saying that I needed to be there for him. The other Aquil and I could see how jealous my mother was. She has a salon, and if I went there, she would cut my hair. It was already a reason for conflict. He was really bad at it, but I always managed to make things right. I was wrong to make a situation that I stayed in for so long. If he came with all the affection, I would be happy. I ended up serend, and in these discussions, he said the following about the apartment I have on the beach in the capital, but with what money do you have conditions? And before that, he had arrived home shortly before this trip with Trambolo. So was Monday. Oko, I think you know, these bikes with a wheel in the front, called a Trambolo, did what this one did. The car bought a motorcycle, because it was charging. I didn't have a motorcycle, so I said, you don't do it because the car. It was the only way we could go to the bazaar and sell clothes. He doesn't care. You can't even walk, and you fell several times. He knows nothing, and the rest of the money isn't the rest of the I'm holding on to the money, because we're going to open a bar in the club in the P series, not sit down. You're not telling me this won't work out, are you? I understand. I'm ready. I already know. For this discussion, right? This car slit, and he ended there. Let's travel. We went to the beach with his mother's car. I accepted the money his mother gave me. I was just that. I called my mother. I said, Mom, don't you think this situation is a bit more complicated for me? At that time, my daughter returned home and my heart died. I went to the beach, and the night arrived on the porch, taking a WHK of his. I said, oh, I wanted to talk with you. Who speaks? He said, I was thinking. From the beginning, I was hit right. I was just going to spend time with you. End that. I spent years in my room. Let's go back. What? It was in my parents' home that we reconnected and later got married. But then he got up. I knew you would do this. You abandoned me when I had nothing, when I had no one. And you started the offenses right away. I just got up and went to the room. I was already prescribed my medicine, because I knew that was going to happen. I looked for my medicine there, and he started to fight with me. I ignored him. He pulled me. Chakalia looked at me. He threw me on the bed. He was so big, 130 kilograms, and he climbed on top of me. He started punching me. I closed my eyes. I tried to defend myself. I screamed and fought back. He soon reached me and I pressed myself between the desk and chair. He started to hang me. We tried to get home, but it was no use. He was so big, and I started to feel sleepy. Then he stopped, and I said, I'll tell you what happened. I think it's unlikely that anyone will believe me, but I'll tell you what happened. He looked at me when he heard me. The voice spoke disconnected words, and the car drove away. I swear, I never felt so much fear in my life. I just trembled without at that moment. I thought he was pretending. I thought he saw that he was doing something, and I was going to die there. He only passed out. At that moment, I jumped over him and ran to another room, locking myself in. I shouted a lot with the help of the neighbors. They called the apartment, and the liquidator only had contact with mine and my mother-in-law, because the apartment was hers. Then, my Isra started calling me right away. Don't leave the room, please. I cried a lot, and then I spent some time on the phone playing the campaign without stopping. He also woke up. I listened to him opening the door and talking to someone. I think it was the S. He was telling me something. So I trembled. We were fighting in our house, and his mother was there. He said, okay, I understand. I was freaked out. He used my depression and my suicide to justify the fights. I was freaked out. I was worried that he thought I was crazy, but he explained that it was just Jessica's outburst. She's always been a bit unpredictable. Then, Beauty spent hours with me. I was so grateful for the attention. I realized I was awake when I opened the door and saw him sitting at the table with his head down, looking calmer. He started when he saw my face. "For the love of God, forgive me," he said. "Forgive me." I was worried that he was crazy, but he explained that it was Jessica's fault. "She's crazy," he said. I spent hours with Beauty. I was so hungry. I realized that I was awake when I opened the door and saw him at the table. He was with his head down, and he was calmer when he saw my face. He started to forgive me. I wanted to go, but he didn't. I looked at my phone. "I don't believe that you did it." I cut all communication with my mother because he controlled the calls. I spoke to my mother, and then I passed me. I live in a paddy, and then he is taking this medicine. I have no structure. I just took sleeping. I was so tired. I asked him to stand just for me. "I'm not sure if I can do it, but I really want to go. I'm not sure if I can do it, but I'm not going to let my family get involved. I don't believe that you did it," and then I cut all communication with my mother because he controlled the calls. I spoke to my mother, and she was controlling. I was living in a paddy, and then he took this remedy. I had no structure, so I just took a nap. I was so tired, and if I stood up, I asked him to just go away. He waited 15 days, 15 or 16 days, until my eye was a little better. I was whole. He had no more money, so he asked his mother for money. He sent him back, and on the way, there are 600 kilometers from the capital to my city. He begged, "Please, don't denounce me. Don't denounce me, I just have you." I had no love for anyone, not a father or a mother. I only have you. He left for a while, and then he came back after 15 days. My eye was a little better, and I was feeling better, too. But then he ran out of money. He asked his mom for money, and she sent him back. On the way, which was 600 kilometers from the capital to my city, he begged me not to denounce him. He said, "Don't denounce me. I'll leave you alone. I just have you." I had no love for anyone in my life, and I was confused. I didn't know why, but he convinced me not to denounce. I said, "Okay, I won't denounce, but I'm going back to my parents' home." He accepted this. When I arrived at my mom's house, she was very sad. I told her, "Sorry, I have a lot of fear." So my family got involved. "My dad, you were so important to me, and I was so grateful for your support. I'll tell you why." He convinced me not to denounce, just to go back to my parents' house. He said, "I'll leave you alone, but you have to go back to your parents." I accepted. When I arrived at my mother's house, she was worried. I told her, "I'm sorry, but I'm scared." My family got involved. My father got involved, and I didn't know who. They were friends in this club. I was very afraid, so my dad never knew. He didn't know I was living in my life. It took a long time for me to make this decision. He came back, right? He ate Salada Lu for me and started where you are. The persecution started when I was in my mother's house. It was every time it was calling, and finally, I came back for his mother. He got involved, and I was very afraid. I didn't know who it was, but they were friends in this club. I never knew anything. My dad never knew anything either. I was living in my life, and then it took a long time for this decision to let go. He came back, right? He ate Salada for me and started where you are. The persecution started when I was in the house of my mother. It's every time it was calling, and finally, I ended up coming back for his mother. I took my son, and then that same cycle right. He was going pro motociclista. I stayed at home doped, suffering, and then one day he had him. There was an uncle who was a truck driver, always making this wheel right. São Bernardo was zero, loaded and back empty. He spoke like this, "Oh, my uncle is there, so never more." I saw the kids. "I will get a ride with him, PR to São Bernardo." I said, "Okay," I did. I was at home with my son, and then that same cycle happened again. He was going to Pro Motoclub, and I stayed home, feeling down and worried. Then one day, he came home with an uncle who was a truck driver. He always made this wheel right, from São Bernardo to Waziro, loaded and empty. He said, "My uncle is there, so I never saw the kids. I'll get a ride with him to São Bernardo." I said, "Okay, I'll do it." I tidied up his bag, and he left. He closed the door. I started pasting everything. The car was my ride. I caught a backpack, and put what I could in it. I went to my mother's house to leave my things there and throw my job away. The other day, I was already working a job. I told him I got my job, and he got really upset. He said, "You won't stop me from working. I need to work. I need to have an income to pay my bills and buy things for my son." I gently placed his bag, posy, and closed the door. I started pasting everything. The car was my car. I caught a backpack, and put what I could in it. Then, I went to my mother's house to leave my things there. I threw my job into the mix, and the other day, I was already working a job. I told him I got my job, and he freaked out. He said, "You won't stop me from working. I need to work. I need to have an income, pay my bills, and pay for things for my son." He complained, but it turned out that Sadu and the job I got ready were very close to the house of Man Moore. He didn't understand that working so close to our house was going home. I said I was needing a lot of my family in that moment, and he agreed. I followed, working on clothes. I was a seller of roux on a certain Saturday. I was getting ready in my mother's car to go to work. I received a message. He was already home. He put 2 big bags. He expressed his concerns, but I explained that Sadu and the job I had lined up were very close to Man Moore's house. He didn't understand, but I assured him that working so close to our house was just a short commute. I said I was needing a lot of my family at that moment, and he agreed. I followed, working on clothes. I was a seller of roux, and on a certain Saturday, I was getting ready in my mother's salt to go to work. I received a message. "Everything that is yours, everything that is mine, mine and your son, that I'm buying the ticket for you to come to Santalo." I started to tremble, and my mother, who was receiving the cell phone, took a message. "None of you will go if you are not. My grandson, you will lose my son." I had the courage to block her, but I didn't even answer. I blocked. I was very nervous, and I went to work. In this, his mother called me, saying, "My son is calling me that you abandoned him, that you left him, because there is no way to give you a good life." I looked at her and said, "No, not quite." I spared her because she was so worried about the situation she was living in. I continued, "I'm working on it. Come here, we'll talk." She arrived with her sister, who is diabetic, and I didn't say much. I showed her the message that, in this moment, my mother called me, "My son, you're saying I abandoned you. You're saying I left you, because I couldn't give you a good life. That's not what I meant at all." I did what I could to spare her, because she was so worried about her situation. I said, "No, pass. I'm working. We'll talk." She arrived with her sister, who is diabetic, and I didn't say much. I showed her the message that I was at the end of my rope. She was already sick, and I couldn't believe it. I said, "No, no, not true, and I won't ask my godson. I won't live a life of this with your son. I already endured a lot with her." And then we said, "I just ask you for something you don't tell." He told me that he told lady there. She arrived and said, "Okay, me. I don't tell him, but you have to stay with him." He told me this. It was you who told me this. I abandoned a daughter, right? You wanted your daughter to stay with a person equal to your son. No, then family. My family won't support me anymore, and I won't lose my family because of that. Then she left, and I thought, so, right now will work out. I'm going to work here. I'll receive my first salary. I'll rent a freight, and I'll get. I promised not to tell anyone that it was you who told me this. I'm not going to abandon you. I'm your daughter, and I want you to be happy. I'm not going to lose my family because of this. Then she left, and I thought, okay, this will work out. I'm going to work, I'll get my first salary, and I'll rent a house. I'll get my things, and I'll see with my son. A day later, I'm working with a client when I realize it was my mother-in-law's car. He gets out of the car and throws a bag at me. The sentence looked at me and said, "Dished her fast." I asked to enter, called the security guards at the neighboring restaurant, and picked up all the things. I gathered my things from the house, and I decided to rent a place to live. I was with my son, and we were trying to figure out what to do when I realized it was my mother-in-law's car. He got out of the car and threw my bag at the door. I looked at him, and he looked back at me. I asked him to leave, and he called the security guard from the neighboring restaurant. He picked up all my things, and I thought, oh no, here we go. He started making calls, and then he went to the door of my house. I begged him to leave me alone, but he wouldn't. He said it wouldn't be that easy, and that I should just accept it. He blamed everything that was happening to me on me, saying that I didn't try hard enough to deal with him. I said I needed to get out of there. I was worried sick about my Lisa, the security I put in place, and there I thought, my God, I'm going to die. He returned, it started calling, and went to the door of my house. I begged him to leave in peace, and he said, I won't, so it won't be easy. You end up with my life. He put the blame on everything happening to me, that I didn't have helped it enough, that I didn't have managed to manage with him enough. I need a woman who is weak, that I only live crying. Anyway, he started to surround me. One day, he called me and said, look, there's a TV receiver in your house that I pay for your brother. I want back. I will sell. I want back. I said, okay, come take it. No, you will not come. Work you bring, and I get in your hand. I thought, no, I won't go to your hand. I will leave in the store, and I will ask for someone to deliver me. I thought I was a very weak woman who spent most of her time crying. Anyway, one day, he called me and said, look, there's a TV receiver in your house that I bought for your brother. I want it back. I'll sell it to you. I agreed to come take it, but he insisted on delivering it himself. I thought, no, I won't go with him. I'll leave the store and ask someone to deliver it to me. I thought about asking Elle to go with him, but he knew all my schedules and routines. So at that moment, I started to ask my family members to leave me at work. I no longer had the courage to go alone, and on that day, my aunt went to leave me at work, while Elle left to sell the TV. I opened the store when I got off the car. I'd seen the car going down the road, but I thought I'd run and open the store. Soon, I'll enter the area where the key was placed on the chair. I felt his hand on my back, which felt wrong, and then he pulled me in. I was innocently delivering the receiver for him, thinking that was all he wanted. He opened the car door, threw me inside, and got out. Al Tava was armed. He grabbed my hair and started driving with his hand, catching my hair with the other. I was on my way to a new relationship, and I was excited to meet the man who would become my partner. I was on my way to the avenue where I had put the key in the chair, and I felt his hand on my back. I was innocent, and I thought he was just trying to help me. He opened the car door, threw me inside, and got out. He had a gun, and he grabbed my hair and started beating me on the dashboard of the car. He was cursing at me, and he was driving towards our house. I tried to calm down, but I couldn't. I tried to talk, but I couldn't. I heard him say, "Let's talk. I will hear you if you're calm." Suddenly, he stopped in front of our house. There was a huge bonfire in front of the house, and I thought he was going to shoot me and burn me alive. I started to identify some. He was tall and strong, and he held my hair as he spoke. He looked for everything that was important to me: my shoes, my perfume, my bags, and my son. Everything I brought into this relationship was gone when I left. He held my head and asked me to look at everything. I told him that if I was so, I had peace, and I felt safe. He let go and started to leave. He tried to take my cell phone, and he took my phone. He grabbed my phone and asked for help, and the aggressions returned. I started to feel like I couldn't reason with him, and I couldn't get his forgiveness. I remember he threw me on the corner of the store, followed me, and then my father, brother, and mother went to the police station at the Ness Women's Police Station. At that time, Lem Maria da Penha was not arrested for blatant assault, which required 3 witnesses or ocular evidence, which I never had. No one saw, not even the store that saw me being played. They didn't want to cause any fear, so I left with only a protective measure. I gave the PE, came home, and then I came back in a car. I was no longer a human being, right? I lost my job and my home. My mother came into the room, and I couldn't hear her. I was shaking like this with despair, and he didn't leave me alone. He continued. My poor son was through a lot. He was persecuted, and then he got in touch with my parents. He said he wanted to see me, but he didn't even realize that he was in pain. He didn't even realize that he had burned the furniture that he had bought. But anyway, I tried to survive with my parents' help. I missed my son so much that I felt like I was missing something in my life. I saw my son and me at my parents' house. I was in a tough spot. I had a mattress on the floor in the room, and I thought, my goodness, I've made a mistake. I felt like I was holding myself back from living my best life. But then, I had a wake-up call. I was at home when I got the news that he had led 2 uncles to burn clothes in the signal in Praga. I felt so worried, and he was still in the hospital. He couldn't resist. He was shot in the head, and he died. I felt so much relief when I realized that I was right. It was a weight off my shoulders, especially knowing how everything has ended for him and his children. I just needed to take care of myself and my son, especially after everything I've been through. Then, I got a job, and I started trying to take medication and feel well again. A while later, I was on Facebook, scrolling through my feed, and I remembered that at the beginning, I said my life was all about my mother. Then, I realized that I was out for a run on Facebook when I stumbled upon the profile of my mother's niece's son. It reminded me of the fun times I had with him when I was a kid. I hadn't seen him in ages, but it turned out he was a grandson of my mother's foster sister. We hit it off right away, and I started checking out his photos. I saw that he had a great family, and we ended up chatting. I was a bit younger than him, but that didn't stop us from having a good time. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I've got a knack for making friends. I met this guy recently. He's a recent graduate, and I've already learned a lot about him. I knew right away that he was a great guy, and he's going to be an awesome friend. We're second cousins, but we're not biologically related. I didn't see any problem with that. We hit it off right away, and my mother said that if she worried, she knew my story. I told him everything. That was in the past, right about my son, about everything. He doesn't care, and we think about it. It was serving, and it was all very light. Everything was very good. You know, when you are not believing that Aquil is going well and everything is moving quickly. With the months we were together at Carnival, we traveled. In this journey, I ended up pregnant with my second child. And my God, I told him, no, don't worry. I'm already created alone. You don't. You need to be with me, just because. I was pregnant with our son, and he didn't know. I was very happy. We lived together for 7 years, and my son is 7 years old. He was born in 2019, and I was born in 2020. I had my third son, and my eldest son also became his son. We are together now. I live in a peaceful, understanding, and companionable relationship. I always encouraged me to work and study, so I'm pregnant now, and he's not. I have one child, and depression is a constant battle. But I have a wonderful partner. We've been together for 7 years, and my son is 7. He was born in 2019, and I was born in 2020. I had my third son, and my eldest son became his son. We're a close-knit family. I've always been encouraged to work and study, so I'm doing that now. I used to work for a multinational company, but we had nothing when we started out. Now, we have our own home. He got a better job with my help, and we have our own car. We have God in our home, love, understanding, and He is my teacher. When I told him all my story, he just hugged me. I said, I never met a woman, girl, so beautiful and so strong like you. My love life will be different, and I'm living proof. I'm so grateful for my journey thus far. When I started, we had nothing, but now we have our own home, a better job, and transportation. I have a loving and supportive partner, and he has been a constant in my life. When I shared my story with him, he gave me a hug. I told him that I've never met a woman as beautiful and strong as you. My life has changed, and I'm so thankful for that. I have 3 children, and my eldest is 13, my middle son is 7, and the youngest is 3. Sometimes, I reflect on the challenges I've faced, and I'm grateful for the strength God has given me. I'm thankful for the second chances life has given me, especially the chance to love again. I still have relapses, but I have one companion in my journey through depression. Music. Jessica, I'm so grateful for your comments. They mean a lot to me. If you're struggling, know that you're not alone. I'd love to hear your story. Fill out the form below. Description of this video. The next story is from Maria Paula, who was pursued by her ex-husband for years. It was like a movie of terror. Don't lose hope. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon on YouTube to receive notifications when new videos are uploaded.